and Guidry goes, let's go look at something that took place 40 years ago. Who cares? Okay, that's political.
Welcome, on behalf of IBM TV, International Broadcast Media, to another edition of The Lawyer's Den. A lively, sometimes cranky and cantankerous discussion amongst those who lead in legal thought and opinion. So with that, welcome to everyone. And I am looking for a certain gentleman out there. I believe he's from North Carolina. Nick Palavita, are you anywhere out there? Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I'm here, Bill. I'm always by your side. Well, sort of. Someday I'll visit you in that Tower of Power in Washington, D.C.
Right,
but not right now. So.
Well, no, Nick, you have to understand. You and I, we go together like peas in a pod. There's no other way around it, Nick.
I don't like peas, but that's okay. It makes you happy. I don't really care. So, so we got some good discussions today for our extremely boring viewers. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we do.
I mean, our boring people that are on here.
Right. But I'm going to spring it on our audience as soon as we get the rest of the crew up here.
You want to bring the rest of the crew on? Okay. Well, we're going to start from the beginning. We're going to bring in this lady who brings class to the crass. That's pretty good. From Lithuania, and then she received her Juris Doctorate in law from the University of Denver. Went on to receive a master's in law, which, by the way, is above a Juris Doctorate. Just to let you know, Bill, in case you don't know. I know you don't have one. We won't get in that later. Okay, then she went on to practice law, unlike some other person who has an LLM we're going to introduce later, and a practicing attorney in the Miami area, member of the Florida Bar, our favorite on The Lawyer's Den. Let's bring in Guidry Stasenite. Guidry, welcome back to the show. She keeps showing up. Such a classy person. It just shows that there are some attorneys that have class, but you can't expect, Gator, you can't expect most of them to have class. So as we move on to a demonstration of that, we're going to the person who graduated from the State University of New York at Buffalo, a person who went to New York City to practice law, a street fighter, somebody who mows over other attorneys. Let's bring in our street fighter on The Lawyer's Den, Fernando Leal. Fernando, welcome to
Nick,
the show.
Bill, Guidry.
It's always good to have a fighter on board, because people have to know how street fighting actually works, and those are people who really do practice law, and that's Fernando. I mean, he's in the trenches all the time, but not everybody on The Lawyer's Den is on the trenches. Some of them on a high perch away from everybody, and this particular person went to the University of Southern California, a place of privilege, a private school that people bribe to get into. We won't discuss that on this thing, on this meeting. Then he went on to The Ohio State University. That's a university that pretends to have a football team, but Clemson and Alabama shows that's not true almost every year. So he went on to receive his master's in law from New York University, which lawyers know about, no one hears about, because they don't have a football team. Then he went on to teach law and teach at Georgia College, where he currently, even today, is a professor there. So let's bring in the educated one among us. This is Adam Lamparero. Adam,
great to be here. Thank you, Nick.
I hope you love my introduction.
I do.
I think about you all the time when I introduce you. I have to really think about it. Okay, so now the thing is to round out the den, we have this gentleman who actually got me admitted before the United States Supreme Court, or I took my only case ever before the U.S. Supreme Court. And he went and received his Juris Doctorate from BYU Law School, and then his LLM from George Washington Law School, another educated person among us. Let's bring in from the Salt Lake City area, Jeff Teichert. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be back.
Yeah. Well, it's really good to have you. And of course, we have our den master that tries to keep everything together. And I get emails from him when things fall apart. This den master actually went to the State University of New York at Buffalo also. That's how you knew Fernando, I believe, and practices in Washington, D.C. So he is a practicing attorney. Let's bring in the den master, Bill Trezevan, who's trying to keep this all together. So we'll see if we can keep it together tonight. I mean, if not, I'll get a stack of emails from, we should have done this, we should have done that, blah, 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 blah. I like to see the guy's incredibly shy, but anyway, that's a whole nother story. It's like Adam. Adam's very shy. He's coming out of his shell. Just takes a while. So, Bill, what's up for tonight? What are we doing here?
Well, we're going to talk about the First Amendment, but not in the way that people often think. And I am going to defer to Adam in a moment to educate us all on it. But essentially, tonight we're going to be talking about freedom of religion. And interestingly enough, when they wrote the First Amendment, they put in freedom of religion before they talked about freedom of speech. And it's been on the news of late because there have been some cases and things, but it's an important issue. And it's going to be an interesting issue. So with that, Adam, can you please at least just bring our guests up to speed about freedom of religion in the Constitution, given that you're an originalist?
Sure. Freedom of religion is contained in the First Amendment, and it contains two components. The first is the Establishment Clause, which provides that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That just means that Congress cannot favor one religion over another through law or religion over non-religion. It also contains the Free Exercise Clause, which prohibits Congress from abridging people's right to freely exercise their religion. And the idea behind that is people should be able to engage in a diverse array of religious practices free from government coercion or retaliation. The Supreme Court's jurisprudence has set forth several principles in interpreting the Free Exercise Clause. First, laws can't target specific religions, as the court enunciated in Church of Lukumi Babalu I versus City of Hialeah. Also, the court may not regulate religious beliefs, only religious practices. It also may not question the sincerity of religious beliefs, and it may not substantially burden religious beliefs. Pursuant to Oregon Employment Division versus Smith, it can only incidentally burden religious practices pursuant to generally applicable laws. Now, the key for the Free Exercise Clause in the future is going to be how you can exercise your religious freedom in the public sphere, and that is contained in Masterpiece Cake Shop, or a decision where regarding whether you can exercise your religion in the public sphere to effectuate discriminatory practices, and that's going to be an important case.
Okay, excellent, and thank you, Adam. What I'd like to do now, Jeff. I want to go from one originalist to another. And Jeff, what are your initial opinions, on this issue, and perhaps Master Cake or Masterpiece, confectionery? Jeff.
Unmute, Jeff.
Sorry. I think it goes a lot deeper than a discussion of cake baking or weddings. The First Amendment, you look at all of the different amendments to the Constitution and you wonder, why is freedom of religion lumped in there with freedom of speech, freedom of the press, right to peaceably assemble and petition the government, and that sort of thing? Well, if you think about where people got their information at the time of the founding, where they got their news, there were two primary places. Number one was in the newspaper, and number two, at the pulpit. And, without TV and radio and all the other inventions that have occurred since then, that was extremely important. So in the same way that you want a variety of strong independent news outlets to provide a variety of views, you wanted a series of strong and independent churches that were free from government interference or from implementing the programs of the government. Now, how does this apply when it comes to making somebody bake a cake that they don't, for a wedding that they may find morally objectionable? I can say for myself, I belong to a religion that doesn't countenance gay marriage, doesn't recognize it, but people have come to me wanting me to do a estate plan for, a gay couple, or a business succession plan, something like that. I've chosen to work with them. I don't feel it's my duty to interfere with what they want to do with their lives and their property. It's to help facilitate the choices that they have made. However, I would not impose the same standard on another business person to say, you must facilitate a wedding that you find morally objectionable. So even if I don't find it morally objectionable, I wouldn't impose the same standard on somebody else. I think the bedrock principle of the Free Exercise Clause is you cannot require people to do things that violate their conscience. And that's where I come down on this. So I sympathize
Okay,
with
no,
the
we're gonna get into that. This was just, remember, opening remarks, because we've got, I don't want to use up the whole hour right now. Fernando, please, your initial thoughts, and unmute, please.
There we go. My initial thoughts. Jeff is correct in that freedom of religion was placed first because people used to get their news from churches or actual newspapers, which have disappeared over the course of my lifetime. But it's also there because prior to that, in the infancy of our country, states were picking religions and making them the official religion of that state. One example is Roger Williams, who left Massachusetts because I believe it was a Presbyterian church, and they weren't allowing anybody else, or they weren't allowing him to practice his religion. So he, in essence, took his ball and went and established the state of Rhode Island. Here in New York City, being a Catholic was outlawed for approximately 100 years. And one of the earliest cases was a case by the name of Bone versus New York City or something or another, where he was a Quaker who, Peter Stuyvesant, who was the governor of New York when it was New Amsterdam, sentenced him for practicing Quakerism. He went to the Netherlands, which in the Netherlands, surprisingly, they hadn't established a religion, and they were going through the rigors of eliminating a state-sponsored religion. He was found not guilty, sent back, and it's one of the cases that forms the basis for Quakers objecting to using their tax money for wars. It's one of the earliest cases that we have. It's from 16 something, I don't remember. Our earliest case, our first case was Reynolds versus the United States, and that was a Mormon Mr. Reynolds, who became a guinea pig to fight the bigamy laws that were put into place. He ended up being convicted, and the best language in that case is a quote from Thomas Jefferson, in where he wrote a letter where he wrote that there was a distinction between religious belief and action that flowed from religious belief. The former lies solely between man and his God. Therefore, the legislative powers of the government reach actions only and not opinions. So if you're going to discriminate, if a business is going to discriminate against a gay couple making their cake, I think that's wrong. I don't think they have that right.
Okay, Deidre, your initial thoughts, and then Nick, I'm coming to you as the heavy hitter on this opening round. But Deidre, how are you thinking about this?
Well, I'm a liberal. However, in this case, I am siding with the masterpiece case and master cake. I apologize. Because it is a little bit more complicated than it seems. Like, it's really not about him, the owner, I think Mr. Phillips, expressing his opinion against gays. He expressed his opinion against the message. He didn't want the specific cake, the masterpiece, to be used for the sending a message. And the Supreme Court in that particular case chose to not analyze the anti-discriminatory practices and regulations laws. They looked into whether state could trump the religious belief. And in this particular case, the Supreme Court decided, I think rightfully, although again, it's a very, very hairy case, that religious neutrality is also an inherent right when it comes to given by the Constitution.
Nick, that brings me to you, and I'm Nick, please. But that brings me to you, Nick, and go around at it. You got everything else.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, I think, the freedom of religion has been ingrained in our Constitution since its inception. I mean, a very, very high, powerful right that was put in there. Now you come to the baking the cake. Someone baked the cake for me. Don't bake the cake for me. I mean, the thing is, I see arguments could go both ways. For myself, I bake the cake. Why? Because I like to make the money. So, I don't have a problem with that. But I could also see the other side that, hey, look, if they don't want to bake a cake, and they may have a legitimate reason not to. And the thing is, because of their beliefs or whatever, or frankly, maybe on the menu, they don't have a cake that looks like the one that they want. I don't know really what transpired there. But I can see that the arguments go both ways. From what I've seen, mainly, Idri, the Supreme Court tends to punt these. They tend to decide things on procedural issues, and they don't tend to get into the nitty gritty. To what extent does the freedom of religion actually interfere with rights of other parties? I'm sure Adam can shed a light on this, because I'd certainly like to hear from him and see what he has to say about baking the cake. I don't know if he's going to bake the cake for that person. He ain't going to bake the cake. I'm not sure if Adam even knows how to bake a cake, to be honest with you, but we'll find out that, I guess, later on.
Okay, well, just to kind of set up the panel, I mean, I know we've been talking about the cake, the master cake case. Essentially, you had a gay couple. They wanted a wedding cake. They went to a bakery shop. They said, "Hey, can you bake the cake?" And the guy said, "No, you're gay, and that doesn't fit with my religion." They filed a claim in the Civil Rights Division, claiming that they were discriminated against. It went back and forth, and then ultimately to the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court said, "Hey, listen, you got to go bake the cake." And the guy was all mad. And interestingly enough, just for our audience purposes, it wasn't just about that cake, because later came, could a florist deny flowers to a gay couple getting married? And then later, interestingly enough, back in Colorado, a transgender person went back to that same bakery shop and asked for a gender reveal cake. And then the guy said, "No, I'm not doing that again." And he didn't bake the cake again. And then, so it's been bouncing back and forth. Now, with that in mind, I want to ask the guests, before everybody gets on their high horse about what they can believe, what they can't believe, or anything else, I want to ask this question. Isn't this fundamentally the same, whether or not the law is going to condone denying private businesses from denying private individuals out in the open marketplace based on whatever the individual beliefs are? And isn't that the same as me, if I was a owner of whatever establishment, refusing to serve Black people at my lunch counter? I mean, what's the difference between my right as an individual, regardless of my background, going just to purchase something that you're offering, Nick, in the open marketplace, and then you telling me you're not going to serve it to me either because of my religion, either because I'm gay, either because I'm transgender, Black, Puerto Rican, Cuban, you pick it. Now, Adam, with that setup, I'm sorry. Okay. Adam, with that setup, I want to go to you, and then Jeff, I'm going to you. Adam, please, you have the floor.
Well, I have a solution to this problem. And as the audience can probably see, this is about the scope of the free exercise right. How strong should those rights be in different contexts? We all know that when someone is practicing their beliefs in a church or in a private space, they have the strongest free exercise protection possible. That's why in Church of Lukumi Babalu I versus City of Hialeah, the law that tried to prohibit them from animal sacrifice at their private ceremony was held unconstitutional, and why in Wisconsin versus Yoder, an Amish family was not required to comply with a compulsory education law. However, there's a difference between exercising your free exercise right in the private sphere versus the public sphere. And I would make an analogy, and I did make this analogy in a law review article, to the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment provides the greatest protection for people when they are in their homes and requires probable cause and a warrant before that home can be searched. But when you're in a motor vehicle, you don't have the same amount of privacy rights. You can be pulled over, for example, for reasonable suspicion. I would make an analogy to the Fourth Amendment and say, when you put yourself in the public sphere, such as in Masterpiece Cake Shop, your free exercise rights are not as strong, particularly when the exercise of those rights results in discrimination against homosexuals, transgendered individuals, and other groups. That's wrong. In my view, the free exercise of religion does not apply or should not trump an individual's right to be free of discrimination in the public sphere.
Bill, you're muted.
I apologize. Jeff, now I'm coming to you, and this is my quandary. Earlier in the opening remarks, you said that you would be privately okay with you handling businesses from people that, whether it's gay or Black, white, or whatever group, but that you would not necessarily stop another person from discriminating in the open marketplace. How does that work then? I mean, is there a standard by which, Jeff, that you would apply that says, hey, the free marketplace, if I'm out there doing business, do I have a right to discriminate based on religion or race or anything else? So how do you put that together? Because either they're operating out in the public economic space, or they're not. Jeff?
I would like to make a very clear distinction because you talked about the lunch counter example. It's a very legitimate question. If somebody comes into a cake shop and they want a cake baked for a birthday party and they happen to be gay, I don't think in that situation the shop owner or the baker has a leg to stand on saying, no, I won't bake for you because you're gay. I think the difference is if it's a wedding cake and they know it's going to be used in a same-sex wedding and they morally oppose that, then you're asking them to do something that violates their conscience. I don't believe that we can intrude on the First Amendment that far. But if it's for some other occasion that has nothing to do with the practices that they oppose, which would be gay marriage in that situation, or their conscience is against it, I don't think we can require them to bake it under those circumstances. Now, it sounds odd. What if somebody comes in and they want a wedding cake and they don't say whose wedding it's for or what the sex of the people is, and they bake the cake and they don't know? Well, okay, that's fine. I have no problem with that. The problem I have is if people are being required to do something that violates their moral conscience, even if their moral conscience doesn't agree with it.
Did you just propose a standard or a solution, Adam? I want to make sure that I point out for you that somebody on this panel is proposing a solution other than you, which has always been our experience. But Jeff, did you just propose a solution that says that any individual that goes into an establishment to purchase goods or services must declare the reason why they're buying that service prior to an owner delivering on that? Is that your standard, Jeff? Because that's what I thought I heard.
No, I'm not suggesting whether they should have to declare or not. I'm just saying if they do declare, yeah, this is for, if it's a man that walks in and says, this is for me and my male fiance, and the owner says, well, I'm in that case, I'm not going to bake this cake. I wouldn't require them to bake a cake if that violates their moral conscience. And I think the First Amendment is all about protecting individuals in their free exercise of conscience. And I think that's what James Madison said in the Memorial and Remonstrance, that our duty to God comes before our duty to civil society and has to be exempt from its cognizance. And that's where I come down on it. I mean, like I said, I would not do that. I've helped gay couples with business succession plans, have no problem with it personally. But like Nick said, I would bake the cake. I want to make the money. I don't have a problem with the people. What they choose to do in their private life is their decision. But I would not impose that standard on someone who really has objections of conscience to it.
Okay, Fernando, I'm coming to you. And I guess my question for you is this. You've often spoken of and are really a strong advocate against the Christian Taliban. Isn't this just another example of the Christian Taliban? This time, they're just resorting to this defense of, oh, well, it's my religion and flowers and cakes, and I don't like gay people. And before it was, well, it's my bakery shop, it's my lunch counter, and I don't like black people. I mean, isn't it just the Christian Taliban setting up a new line of attack on our multicultural society? Fernando, how do you think about that?
No, I agree 100%, and the world's probably going to come to an end because today, as of right now, I'm agreeing with everything Adam has to say. I don't agree with Jeff's line of thinking. This is akin to owning a lunch counter. I'm going to say Woolworth, even though they don't really exist anymore, and segregating the lunch counter or saying black people not allowed. Or before that, Irish need not apply. In Boston, when the Irish were coming over, fleeing the potato famine, it's splitting hairs. So you can exercise your religion. You can pray to whatever you want, a rock, a toad, God. Nobody cares. Nobody can interfere with that. Nobody can make laws against that. But once you start using that exercise of religion as a pretext to break the law, that's a problem. If you have a business, guess what? Your business is there and working in the public sphere. You have to serve everyone. I'm pretty sure there were a lot of Southerners, and Nick could probably tell us, that hated when counters were integrated and hated that they had to serve African Americans. But guess what? They had to do it. And likewise here, you cannot hide behind your religion and say, hey, I'm morally opposed to this. I'm not going to do it. So then that means, hey, then let honor killings go forward. Oh no, wait a minute. Wait a minute. That's Islam. We don't like them. Because really, let's get down to brass tacks here. Freedom of religion and exercise of religion boils down to Christian religions. If you want to practice something else, people are going to come down on you. If you're Jewish, if you're Muslim, if you practice any of the Hindu religions or Shintoism or Buddhism, we don't know about those. This is really about let's Christianity.
Okay.
And whatever iteration it takes.
Okay. Now, Nick, I'm coming directly to you because you often defend, and I believe you said the other day in some conversation, I don't think it was on air, that there are over, 144 million Bible-thumping people.
Absolutely.
Good-hearted Bible-thumping
right.
people. Okay.
Yeah, and we've had to deal with Yankees like Fernando in the past and the Yankee way of life, and we have complete workarounds, Bill. And the thing is, we work around so fast that Fernando didn't even see it happening. Now, I know we're not on the race thing, but the race workaround in my high school was real simple. Remember when the Yankees said you got a bus? Okay, well, the people down south really didn't like this busing deal. So you know what they did? All the upstairs in our high school were blacks, all the downstairs were whites. So once they got to our school, we're segregated anyway. That was called a workaround. And you know what really made us mad is because in Boston, even though we had to what do you call it, segregate our schools or bring everybody together, they didn't have to because they didn't have a history of racial tension. Baloney. And now let me tell you another workaround, Bill. You think Woolworth, and I've been to that place. It's in Greensboro, where the Greensboro boys, they sat down there and say, look, you can't kick us out. And you guys, whoa, everything's, equal and fair. And it's not equal and fair. And I know this isn't the race thing, but let me tell you what they do here in the South. They have private clubs. Okay. And one of them is in Palm Beach, where your friend Donald happens to reside. Some of them he can't get into. And you know what happens? If you don't think discrimination doesn't exist, it does. If Fernando applies to the private club, they look at him, so they look at his application, and poof, he's not in. And they do that all the time. So this whole myth that people are equal is absolutely insane. And now there's another workaround that Adam hadn't even thought of, okay, on this cake deal. They publish a menu of all the different types of cakes that are available. Guess what? There's no cake that has a man and a man or a woman to woman as part of the cake. So you ask for a cake and say, sorry, it ain't on the menu, buddy. You go have a good day and take your Yankee thinking from Ohio State somewhere else. So the workarounds go on every day. And the real problem is that the Yankees don't see it happening every day in the South, 144 million people.
Okay.
Have a good day, guys.
Okay.
Enjoy your cake because you're not getting it in the South, buddy.
Let them eat cake, as Marie Antoinette.
Let them eat cake, buddy. But it ain't gonna have two guys on the cake either.
Okay.
Because that ain't on the menu.
All right. Well, so Guidry, I'm coming to you, and then Jeff, I'm coming back to you to see if you've changed your mind about any stuff. But Guidry, I have my particular question for you is this. Is there a modern day twist? Because if you take this freedom of religion and say somebody says, my religion says that I don't have to serve immigrants. I don't like them. I don't, for whatever reason, they don't speak the American language. I have fundamental belief. The toad that I worship, says that I don't. And the stone that I keep in my pocket that I believe in says that I don't. Do you see that as a possible problem? Because, is this a matter of using this just to discriminate against whoever and just substitute gays or blacks or whatever and say it's my religion? Guidry, what do you think of that?
No, I don't think that that's realistic. Just to say, really back to from my experience, the cake that I had that had 2 grooms was much tastier than maybe 10 cakes from the wedding from groom and wife. So I think there are also a lot of skills picking more delicious cake, and I loved it. I want to take you guys, just to answer your question, Bill, I do not think that this could possibly happen because there are not that many people who would want to lose business, to have a media scrutiny, and to really go against the community, against the society by trying to impose certain religious or even different kind of discriminatory practices. it is not a business practice. It is not a real business practice, and therefore I don't think that it's something that could realistically happen. And the precedent has demonstrated that it also has not been occurring to the point. The master cake case is different case, and I think for me, trying to believe the best in the people, I do not see it after listening to the Supreme Court's arguments. I did not see it as much as a discriminatory issue as much as a messaging issue, something like freedom of the speech, religious neutrality. I think it is important to understand that wedding cake, not any cake, it's a masterpiece. It's something that takes time, takes effort. It is something that is created and something that actually holds a message in it. It could be a temporary piece of art. And when you take it in a context, this wedding cake in the middle of the wedding where two people need to cut it and feed each other and celebrate their, the wedding, I think it's very, very beautiful. But at this point, it becomes not only, it actually changes from being a meal to becoming a platform of messaging or message. And therefore, I think there was sense to really trying to understand the argument on the other side. And that where it goes to the private businesses, where I do not think that, I think there was an argument mentioned, not argument, but a parallel analogy that, okay, let's imagine that someone comes to your store and says, I want a cake that says the 9th of November is the best day, and you have to make this cake. The next day someone comes and says, well, I'm going to have the same cake because of the Kristallnacht from the Nazis Germany. So then as the owner of the masterpiece, cake store, something that requires so much effort to really create a unique piece, do you obligated to really produce that cake when you know the context of it and it stands against your moral compass? I think it is a little bit more complicated. And or let's say like opera singer too, who performs for religious practice, who performs, let's say in a cathedral, and then somewhere a Baptist, knowing that, can they force her also to perform in their church just because not to be discriminatory? So again, I think it has a little bit more layers to it, but I am 100% against the discriminatory practices. I definitely agree with everything that was said. However, I can see the point there too, that freedom of speech and religion also comes to play.
Okay, Jeff, Guidry just raised a razor sharp example. What if I'm a Jewish baker and a Nazi comes in and wants me to bake a cake to celebrate Kristallnacht? Now, Jeff, I was giving you a hard time earlier about that, but that I don't even know how to explain that one. What are you thinking about her example? Because Guidry, thumbs up here on the Lawyer's Den. That one, devastating. Jeff?
Well, honestly, yeah, I was coming up with the example of what if you were an active member of a black church in the South and you were asked to bake a cake for a Ku Klux Klan rally, and you're out in the marketplace, so what are you required to do in that situation? I can't believe I'm agreeing with Guidry, and she's the only person on this panel that agrees with me. I think I'm going to faint. But honestly, yeah, I believe that fundamentally we're talking about matters of conscience. And I think where we run into trouble is when we're saying, well, it's so obvious that every enlightened person should think the way that I think, that it isn't an imposition on anyone else's conscience to make them do something that they don't want to do, even if it's on religious grounds. And I would also point out, and this is at a more philosophical level, I suppose, but our idea of rights in the Anglo-American legal tradition comes from theology ultimately. In the 17th century, for example, the three prevailing political theories had theological roots: the divine right of kings, the English common law, and the idea of natural law, which is that there's these certain, well, I'll state it in Jeffersonian terms, they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. I think fundamentally our belief in God and our opportunity to believe in and worship God as we please and to be protected in our rights of conscience is what gave rise to our belief in the inherent dignity of human beings.
Okay.
If you start to erode that by saying there's all these other things that come before God, I think you run into trouble. You run into social engineering that threatens that.
And that's an excellent point, social engineering. So, Adam, I'm coming to you, and then Nick, I'm coming to you. So, Adam, I guess my question is, you've heard Guidry's example and argument, and you've heard Jeff's argument. Does that change your idea, particularly with this in mind, that Nick said that there are always workarounds? Now, I don't know how you feel about those Southern workarounds, but Adam, what are you thinking now that you've heard the argument from both Guidry and Jeff? And, well, those two examples I think are devastating. But Adam, your thoughts, please.
I think they're bad examples. I don't agree with either of them, and I'm shocked that Guidry countenances discrimination. Here's the solution to the problem. The free exercise clause. When you are exercising your religious freedom in the private sphere, in a church, in your home, you can do anything you want to do. But when you put yourself out in the public sphere, such as by owning a business and offering services to the public, you have an obligation to comport with the law, particularly anti-discrimination laws. Your religion is not a license to discriminate against people in the public sphere. You can do whatever you want in private. And I gave you an analogy to the Fourth Amendment. When you're in your home, police need probable cause and a warrant to search your home. But when you're in a motor vehicle, guess what? They don't need a warrant, and they have a much lesser degree of suspicion required. It's called reasonable suspicion. So for those who would use their religion as a sword to discriminate against gays, to discriminate against people on the basis of race, okay? The Nazi example, Guidry, is not involving a protected class. It's a red herring. Using religion in the public sphere to discriminate against people and deprive them of equality and liberty, for those people, my message to them is simple. You can take your religion and you can shove it up your you-know-what.
Okay, thank you, Adam. You're always great for the ratings. We got Nazis and we got, defiant statements. Now, Nick, I'm coming to you because I guess this is my question. Given Adam's standard right now, he said that if you're in the public sphere, then, you got to do it. But if you're in the private sphere, now, doesn't the private sphere for you include private country clubs? So even for Adam's analysis, you and your crew would be okay, right? And you, Nick, but wouldn't you be okay?
Well, the thing is, that's the reason I laugh at guys like Adam, because the thing is, we work around that guy all the time. He sees things one way and that we're supposed to do it his way, and we're not supposed to discriminate because in his puny little mind that this is the way it is, that gay couples are equal to heterosexual couples, which they're not. But he believes that he wants everybody to believe that, and we don't. Not everybody does. But rather than sit and argue with them, public, private sphere, and all this other trash, we just do a simple workaround. Like I said, create the menu where that ain't on the menu, buddy. He goes, well, you have to associate. You don't have to associate with them. We have freedom of association. Create a private club, and Adam, you're not welcome. I mean, it's real simple. So the thing is, you can have I agree, you can have your public domain, and you can have all your liberal utopian sort of ideas out there. But that doesn't mean that everybody has to suck up to it, because they don't. There's a lot of people, I hate to say that, Adam, that do not believe in, quote, your idea of gay marriages. They don't. And there's some scientific evidence that I know of that two gay couples married cannot produce children. Now, if they can, the only way I know they can do it is one is a hermaphrodite.
Nick, we're not into that debate. Fernando?
Texas, and there's difference in sex. I know you don't believe it, Adam, but you sit on top of that perch in Georgia and you don't see what goes on in the real world. Come to the South someday, and you live in the South. Wake up someday, and you'll smell the coffee.
Fernando, unmute first, but Fernando.
I am.
Okay, your thoughts?
Yeah, my thoughts are that Nick is really funny because he doesn't live in the real world at all. Because most people that are in the South aren't going to private clubs. As a matter of fact, private clubs are only for the super wealthy. The clubs that he's talking about. I happen to belong to a private club, even though I'm not wealthy, but that is by virtue of an association with my fraternity. This whole private club workaround is just nonsense, because you aren't going to make everything a private restaurant where only a select few can go, because the business just will not survive. Go ahead and create the menu. So I order a cake that's off the menu. When you give it to me, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put that topper that has 2 men on it or 2 women. And you know what? your workaround just got screwed. The truth of the matter is that I still agree. Jesus Christ, I still agree with Adam. If you're gonna be operating in the public sphere, you cannot use your religion as a shield or a sword to say that I'm not gonna do X, Y, and Z, because one day it's gay couples. Okay, so now the next day it's women. Now the next day it's women who have had an abortion. Now it's women who have had divorces. This also filters through to people working, clerks at courthouses who don't want to issue marriage licenses because their religion says that gay marriages are wrong. Personally, I could care less who gets married and who does what. But, a lot of this issue is that people's brains have been eaten away with this religious nonsense. And I'm glad that the founding fathers, although they believed in religion, were also men of reason and practicality who understood that religion had to be kept in check. And that's why they created the First Amendment in the way that they did.
Yeah, and they were also slaveholders. They were also treasonous because they engaged in a revolt.
I'm fine with them. I'm fine with them being treasonous. I could care less that they were slaveholders. It doesn't affect me.
Okay.
I have no problems with them.
Okay, well, fine.
I'm pretty sure if I look through my family, I'm pretty sure we owned slaves at some point. And if anybody ever comes after me for reparations, I'm going to laugh in their face and walk away.
Okay, Fernando, I'm so glad that you're defiant because it's heroic, but we're not talking about slave ownership.
You brought it up.
No, I just brought it up. Can you discriminate in the public domain? But whatever. Why want to do that for our audience? Today, this show is a historic show because we have Guidry, who believes in a living constitution, siding with Jeff, who is an originalist and believes in the 4 square corners. And then we have Fernando from New York City agreeing with Adam from down in Georgia. That's amazing. And then we have Nick engaging in his workarounds, publicly engaging in workarounds. I mean, if this was a deposition, it'd be like, buddy, you're over. Now, this is what hearing all of this, what I'd like us to do, because this matter is going to be coming up before the Supreme Court as religious groups try to retest the waters, so to speak. What is the standard that our audience should be thinking about? I mean, how is it that we think the law ought to be? Because currently, it's apparently resulted in decisions that nobody necessarily agrees with, as evidenced by our 4 panelists being 50-50 with Nick as an outlier. So I want to start with Adam, because you're great with solutions. Adam, can we start with you and your solution? Mute, Adam.
My solution is that when you're practicing your religion in a church or in your home or in any private sphere, you can discriminate as much as you want and you can practice as much as you want. The Free Exercise Clause gives you that right. When you put yourself out into the public sphere, such as through a business, you do not have a right to discriminate. The Equal Protection Clause means something. Imagine what it's like for a gay couple, transgender individuals, Black people, Hispanic people, to go out and they can't get services because people hide behind religion to discriminate against them. In the public sphere, just like when you drive a car under the 4th Amendment and you don't have the same 4th Amendment rights as you do in your home, when you're in a business, you don't have the same free exercise rights as you do when you're in a church. Why? Because you're affecting other people and you're discriminating against other people. Whether it's gays, transgender people, African Americans, it's wrong. We deserve to live in a society where equality and collective liberty trumps individual liberty. And I'm shocked that Guidry, who is so liberal on immigration, would champion discrimination. It's really shocking to me.
Okay, Guidry, unmute, because you get the direct response. And then I'm coming to you, Jeff. Yeah, so first then Jeff.
That's what you said when you talked about the case. You said it's complicated. How is it complicated?
Okay. I think the issue is here that we are not talking about the facts surrounding the case and what I'm talking about. I'm saying that when this couple came to Lakewood, Colorado, where I lived, and asked to buy a cake for a specific reason, they asked for service. They asked for artistic service time to be done. They wanted a rainbow banner. They wanted to send a message. They wanted something to reflect the marriage that the owner did not agree based on his religious beliefs. He said, you can buy anything in the store. However, I do not feel comfortable making this piece of art cake that represents the message that is contrary to my belief.
I don't care about his beliefs.
No. But Adam, I'm not talking. So right now, I think there is a very thin line, and you're right. It's difficult where that line is drawn. Where the religious freedom, where the religious, aspects go to the discriminatory aspects. So right now, me believing in the best in people, I do want to give a certain weight to the position where the owner of this store came. The owner knew that he's going to lose a lot of business by doing that. It's not profitable. He was scrutinized, and I do absolutely disagree with it. I remember in Colorado when I heard of this case, I was completely appalled. However, if you could, I don't think that it is very, very effective to put this blanket statement and saying particularly on artistic services. So right now, I think we're talking about two different things. And one of the examples was about Nazis that I gave, but another was about the opera singer who provides a service in a religious church. And then is she obligated, in order not to discriminate, to perform the same service in a different religious institution? And my point here is that no, I think that there is very, very limited point, the limited reality, when people, private business owners, could not be forced to perform specific artistic things. So I'm not talking about hairdressers. I'm not talking about handyman. I'm talking about a product on which you spend a lot of time and you produce to the world that sends a message taken in the context. But please don't tell that I am discriminatory or anything. I'm absolutely appalled by discrimination. I'm just asking you to consider this aspect of this case.
Okay, Jack, I want to come to you with a bit of a twist. Because you're saying that for you wouldn't necessarily do it, but you believe that with Guidry that, for other reasons, other people may have that right. But I'm struck because you've often advocated within the terms of the discussions of freedom of speech. You said, hey, listen, we all have freedom of speech. My freedom of speech does not allow me to set up a temple in your living room, right? Now,
Right.
keep in mind, isn't the reverse of that standard also true? As Adam pointed out, my freedom of religion, great, in my own home, but that doesn't grant me a right to go out into the public square and just sua sponte, all on my own, just set up some obligation and declare my my religious freedom to discriminate. Jeff, how do you feel about that?
Well, what if I want to go out in the public square if I'm a woman wearing a burqa because I'm a Muslim? I don't think you shed your religion when you leave the front door of your church or your home. And to take another example of what Guidry was talking about, my former wife used to sometimes paint murals in people's homes on their walls. What if someone took Adam's favorite example and said, I want you to come into my home and paint a painting of Jerry Falwell and his mother having sex in an outhouse on my wall? And let's suppose she says, that violates my conscience. We don't compel people in matters of conscience. As to what the standard should be, the first case, as Fernando correctly pointed out, was Reynolds versus United States. And it was basically, you can't say, I'm not going to obey the law because it's against my religion. The second case, a landmark case in my mind, was Wisconsin versus Yoder, which basically said you get an exception to generally applicable send your kids to school laws for the Amish because their religious beliefs compel a different kind of education, and we want to honor that, and so they get an exception to laws of general applicability. And then we went back to the Reynolds standard in Oregon Employment Division versus Smith, which essentially said as long as you're not targeting religion for specific discriminatory treatment, you can't use your religious beliefs as a reason to violate the law. My belief as to what the standard should be, go back to Wisconsin versus Yoder. The Constitution protects you against the requirements of laws of general applicability unless there is a compelling governmental interest to the contrary, and the means that the government chooses is the least restrictive or the least imposing on religion that could be created, that it has to be very narrowly tailored. I think that is the better standard, and it's more respectful of people's individual rights of conscience. I'll quote Jefferson, since Fernando did. The Jefferson Memorial has this beautiful statement around the top of the rotunda: "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." My interest in this is we do not compel people in matters of conscience. That is fundamental to our system of government, fundamental to the Bill of Rights.
Okay, Fernando, I'm coming to you, and then Nick, I'm coming to you. But Nick, when I get to you, I've got a bit of a twist. Fernando, what are your thoughts? I mean, because right now you guys are both using Thomas Jefferson on differing sides. How is it that you're looking at the way Jeff mischaracterizing Thomas Jefferson, or are you mischaracterizing Thomas Jefferson? Fernando?
No, Jeff, because he's cherry picking the sentences here and there that want to make his point. When at the end of the day, Jefferson, who passed the first, before even the Bill of Rights, the Virginia Freedom of Religion Act, and I don't remember the quotes that came about, but he was of the belief that you can practice whatever you want and you can believe whatever you want, but that it can't bleed over into the public sphere and sit there and use it as a shield. I am still in Adam's camp. And now where Deidre and I are going to differ a little bit is that she sees the wedding cake as a work of art because she has the eye of an artist. I have the eye of a simpleton. So I see it as a cake that I'm going to eat. I go, oh, wow, that's pretty. But, 20 minutes from now, that cake is just not going to exist. And if I can have 2 or 3 slices from the wedding cake, I'm going all out, especially if it's good. When you're doing services such as making cakes and pastries or cutting hair, that is completely different than the singer. That is just a different type, or in Jeff's case, his wife, who is an artist who's painting things on walls. It's different. And that's why you're never going to have a one size fits all law. And it's always going to be on a case by case basis. And for Nick, here's one for you. I'll give you this one. A workaround for that baker would have been, I don't know how to make rainbow cakes. I don't know how to make rainbow dough. So I'm really not the person to make this cake for you. Now, caveat, if in his window he has a unicorn cake that he sells to kids that's made out of rainbow dough, then all bets are off. But in all honesty, the workaround would have been don't sit there and start saying it's my religion, because that's part of the problem. Everybody wants to start throwing their religion in everybody's face, and really it's telling these gay couples that you're bad, boo-hoo on you, you should burn at a stake. I'm not making your cake because you're gay. Use your brain a little bit and sit here and say, hey, I don't know how to make that. Okay. I'm going to screw it up. You should go somewhere else that kind of knows what they're doing.
Okay, well, okay, thanks, Fernando. I'm coming to you, Nick, but my just observation on that, Fernando, shouldn't I, under that circumstance, change the sign to my bake shop and just put incompetent baker? Come on in. But sign, that's a bad joke. Nick?
Not everybody knows how to make everything.
No, I understand, Fernando. Now, Nick, 1, unmute, but 2, I guess my question for you, Nick, is that going back to what the standard should be. Now, with you, I want to kind of get your thoughts in this regard. As from your perch, both as an attorney and a media mogul here with IBM TV, we broadcast around the world. And oftentimes people look at America to either make the arguments in their own countries. And here we have this discussion over freedom of religion or individual rights. I mean, don't we have, what standard would you advocate, understanding that the millions of viewers around the world are going to be listening to us? And so I'm asking you, Nick, how would you reasonably do so? Because, the other day, Jeff accused you of just misrepresenting your own thoughts, and I don't believe that to be true. So,
yeah.
Nick, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I need to help educate our Yankee from the North, aka Fernando, who made a statement quite inaccurate that private clubs don't exist in the South. If he ever does a fact check on Palm Beach County, where I used to live, Fernando, 80% of all homes in Palm Beach County are in a homeowners association or private club. 80% or more. Okay,
That's
so
not what I said.
so
What I said is if you're going to privatize everything, you're not going to
look,
make any money.
I believe
So don't mischaracterize or misquote what I'm
this
saying
is my floor.
because
You can
you're
go look
old
at
and
the
feeble
tape.
and you can't hear.
Listen, the real problem that you have is you've never gone past the Mason-Dixon line.
Oh,
There's a
no, I
little
have.
line.
I go to Florida all the time, and I've gone to Georgia all the time.
Okay, yeah. So you make one or two trips down there, but you've never
Nope,
probably never
more than
been to.
that.
You've probably never been to Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas. You probably don't even know what those states exist.
Been
Okay,
to
but
Louisiana a bunch of times. I
you
know
know,
they exist, and I can actually find them on the map without you pointing them
yeah.
out.
So the thing is, could you even find Arkansas? I bet you haven't been to Arkansas. But anyway,
I've not been to Arkansas. There's nothing going on there.
yeah,
It's
nothing going on there.
above.
See,
It's above Alabama and Mississippi.
Bill, see, this is typical. Okay, 144 million people. He barely knows what's going on here, except the occasional vacations he takes down here. Palm Beach County is 80% homeowners association and private clubs. Okay, so don't think that that doesn't exist down here. It does. Now, when it comes to the standard, we know you Yankees try to impose your idea of what should be done in the South, and you do it all the time. But that doesn't mean that we're going to agree with everything that you do, including your atheistic idea that, well, if there's no religion, the cities are going to be better. Look at the cities in the South. They're much better than the cities like New York. I mean, you love New York, but it's a bunch of slums strung together with a bunch of violence. It's a crazy place. A good Southerner just will not live in your crazy stinking city, and your city stinks. Okay, our cities.
Actually, that's why most Southerners come up
I
here
believe I have the floor, counselor.
to evade the shacks that they're living in.
Den Master, your friend of 40 years, can you put a gag order on him, please? Okay, thank you. Okay,
Not when you're lying.
So I'm not lying. If you go to the cities in the South, you'll notice that they're clean, pristine. The people are orderly. They're God-fearing people. You go up to New York City, they don't fear God. They don't fear anything. The city stinks, and it's slums stuck together. We just don't like that style of living, counselor. So what happens is that we are God-fearing people. We believe in freedom of religion. The problem is you move toward this public sphere, you run into more and more issues. So the workaround is stay away from the public sphere. And the more you get into the public, yeah, and if you don't want to bake a cake for that particular group, have your menu set. And when they come in, well, I want this and that. Well, it's not on the menu. Well, I'm going to make you doing this and that. No, you're not. It's not on the menu. It's like going to an Indian restaurant and say, I want Chinese. You don't get Chinese in an Indian restaurant, and you don't get two gay couple on the cake because the cake doesn't have that on the menu. Simple.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Case done, and we move on.
Okay, well, thank you, Nick, because this is what we're going to do. We're going to move quickly. We're going to move right along the bottom. Adam, Guidry, and Jeff. And these are kind of the concluding remarks, and then we have to see if we can land this plane. So, Adam, your thoughts, and just make sure you're unmuted first. There you go, Adam.
Well, let me just be very clear. Neither Guidry nor Jeff would ever support and do not support any form of discrimination. Guidry's views on immigration have been quite intelligent and responsible, but the effect of their view, is that it leads to discrimination. It creates second-class citizens. It creates inequality. It creates discrimination. And let me tell you, do you know how many people who have committed suicide because of the inequality, the discrimination that they have suffered? Many. And the last time I checked, in Reynolds versus U.S. and Employment Division versus Smith, the First Amendment's free exercise clause doesn't grant exemptions from generally applicable laws. I think when you're in the public sphere, you should comply with anti-discrimination laws. In the private sphere, you can do whatever you want.
Okay. Guidry, Adam's point, just to give you a chance, Adam's point is that the First Amendment doesn't allow certain things in the public domain. And frankly, it's quite interesting because freedom of religion is the first portion of the First Amendment. So your concluding thoughts, and don't mind Adam, I'm going to put him on mute.
I love at this point how he finishes with a smile at God of clarifying that we are against discrimination. I appreciate that. I will stick with the point that I said. In my opinion, the wedding cake has its own identity. It's a specific creative service that has been asked. My opinion is that something that is messaging that against your private religion should also have a platform, and a person should not be forced to render certain service. Master creation if the purpose of that creature stands against the religion and moral beliefs of that person. On the other note, I think this master case demonstrates again that our society has the right values, and there are not a lot of people who are willing to step to the other side and really who would suffer such a business decline as did this person. And hopefully, again, for the moral grounds, I still believe that it is the person that this happened for the moral grounds, for the messaging, again, creation of the masterpiece, and it wasn't targeted against the people for being gay.
Okay, Jeff, let's just make sure we got you on. Yeah, there you go. Jeff, your concluding thoughts. The floor is yours, young man.
Well, the First Amendment, freedom of religion, and the Establishment Clause are created for what purpose? We oppose an established church because we don't want the church to become the propaganda arm of the state. We want a variety of strong and independent churches that can espouse a wide diversity of beliefs. The same thing goes for free exercise of religion. We want a variety of strong and independent churches, and we want people to be free in matters of conscience. And when we talk about discrimination, I want to ask the audience to think about this case that I argued should be overturned, Oregon Employment Division versus Smith. The basic facts of that case were simply that Oregon law banned peyote, and the only people interested in using peyote were the Native American church who used it, who smoked it as a sacramental ordinance. Well, Justice Scalia, in what I think is the worst opinion he ever wrote, decided that wasn't a question of when someone's leaving the church or leaving their house and they're out in public. They were in a directly religious ceremony. And Justice Scalia said you can't use drugs and avoid anti-drug laws because it's against your religion. Now, did the same thing happen to sacramental wine for Catholics during Prohibition? No. They got an exception. Why? Because they're big and powerful. So my question is, do we discriminate against small religions with anachronistic views that are increasingly out of the mainstream because they're bucking the trend of society? My belief is when you start doing that, you start making our rights subject to majority rule. And that takes us on a short route to chaos and oppression. I don't believe we compel people in matters of conscience, even if our conscience dictates something else. Leave people alone in matters of conscience.
Okay, well, I think that wraps up everybody's view. This has been an amazing conversation, but now I did have one more request of my friend from the south, further south. Nick, can you land this plane for our audience?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Before I disparage Adam again about his thoughts on discrimination, since discrimination's okay as long as it's against Nazis and white supremacists, but that's another story. We'll leave that to another day. But in the meantime, look, he's shaking his head. Thank you, Bill, for muting Adam. You've done the Lord's work finally today, and thank you all for listening to The Lawyer's Den. We'll see you next time. And Guidry goes, let's go look at something that took place 40 years ago. Who cares? Okay, that's political.